Hello everybody, thanks for tuning into this short video. We're just going to go over a little bit about what is the Liati Institute of Self-Realization. So, living a life of higher purpose. Liati stands for Love is All There Is. And I've been working in the field of shamanic medicine and energy work and all kinds of healing and coaching for about 20 years. And what I found is that what people want the most when they come in is a sense of peace and calm, tranquility, connection to their higher self, and healing from shadow or healing from trauma. And what happens when we have done a lot of our work on ourselves, we've done a lot of healing on our human stuff, is that we elevate our frequency into a love frequency for ourselves and also for others and for the planet. We become more in tune with the wholeness and the collective. So what I like to say is that we elevate our frequency to the diamond heart frequency, which is kind of what we would call a Christ consciousness, a universal field of love defined by oneness. So that is kind of the heart of shamanism as well. When we climb to the mountain of shamanism in any tradition you would like to choose, with all the different tools that are out there, whether it be sweat lodge or plant medicine or meditation or breath work or counseling or coaching, whatever it is, what we find is that we all get to this place that is kind of this mystical oneness place where we're all connected and we're all one. All right, and there's no separation. So that is what Liati is all about, is remembering that. Because the opposite of that is when we're in shadow or trauma, when we're disconnected from love, disconnected from this part of ourself that is whole and connected. So that's really probably the worst place you can be, right? Super disconnected, in survival mode, depressed, stuck in that manic old mind pattern, and letting the traumas from the past drive our life. So Liati is about healing those things and coming back home to the self, which is in the center of the heart. All right. So what happens? I like to just make a little map for everybody. It's kind of fun to make these graphics because our Eros language is a graphic and it's more of a metaphor and it goes deeper into the system than words do. So if you've done the 5 pillars, you understand all of what I just said. Okay, so what we have here is we have our highest self, and we might call this our soul. And this soul self is connected to everything. It's whole. It's full of unity. We might call it our angelic self. It vibrates at this frequency of the unconditional love frequency, which heals everything, which is where miracles come from, which is what can happen when we do our work and we come into this vibration of love, which is not really an emotion. It's more of a vibration, kind of like a spaceship where you can go anywhere and see anything with it. So what we do is we have this whole self that we have with us before we incarnate. And forgive me, I'm going to use some reincarnation terminology. So when we incarnate, we come into form and we come into body. When we come into body, we are these little children. And as a child, we are really, really open and really, really connected to this higher self. Okay, this higher self and the child are kind of like pals, and it's the most authentic part of us because it hasn't been molded or conditioned yet into the human world. So it's very magical. It's very trusting. It's very intuitive. It knows things without any, thinking. Kids know who they like. They know who they don't like. They trust themselves. They're curious. Okay, so that's a loving incarnation of the higher self as this inner child. So think about yourself as a child and what you love to do and feel that frequency of how exciting that was. That's what I'm talking about here. That's that Liati frequency. So what happens to this? What happens to us as people? So when we incarnate, we choose to come into body. When we come into body, we encounter certain experiences that maybe muddy up this connection to the higher self and the inner child. And we call this the shadow formation. Okay, we might call it also soul splitting in shamanism because a part of us might get frozen in the past from a traumatic experience, and then we keep going on in life kind of with a leg missing or half of our heart missing, and we wonder why when we get to 40 or so that we're feeling empty and numb and depressed and all these things. Because we're missing part of our essential nature, that's why. Or our essential nature is very clouded and we don't even feel it anymore. Okay, like this picture shows. So we call this shame body creation or pain body creation as well. So how does this happen? Well, incarnation, first of all, birth trauma, coming from this expansive soul into this little tiny human body where we have limitations. It's very, very interesting that we choose to incarnate as humans, right? Cultural conditioning. We could also call this ancestral trauma. Family dynamics, developmental trauma, how we learn to survive in our family unit by people pleasing or fawning or fighting and, getting aggressive or flighting and getting really addicted to video games or dissociating somehow. So this is how we do this. We're not just dissociating and disconnecting from the family, we're disconnecting from ourselves as well, from our total vibration. Okay, emotional wounding. Sometimes emotions are just too much to handle at one time. So they freeze and they get stuck in the aura. And when they get stuck in the aura, they end up feeling heavy and, depressed later on. Yeah, it's not so great. But, we're not meant to process everything at one time. So all of us have wounding, all of us have trauma. It's not a dirty word, it's a human reality. And where we have trauma, we are the most wise. So it's good stuff, actually, in the end, if we do our work. Past life contracts. So we might have past life contracts or things we're working out with people, with relationships that need to be figured out in this life. And sometimes it can be very hard work. And that can sometimes feel overwhelming. And again, disconnect us from this heart. Okay. So we disconnect from ourselves somehow. Something happens and we think it's easier to close down and contract than it is to stay open. That's what happens. So what happens when this happens is that we decide we're going to make a personality or an ego based on this criteria, based on the story we tell ourselves about our life, based on our history instead of a connection with our huge heart that we actually have. We base it on our survival strategies rather than being present. So we develop habits and defenses in the I am structure of me. I am this, I am that, you are this. And we become very separated from our heart, from our wholeness, from our unity with everybody else, from the collective. All right? So when we're in that state of consciousness, it can be very, very interesting. It can show up many different ways, but most of the ways it shows up, at least in the US and Western culture, is by depression, anxiety, stressed and exhausted, and hypervigilance, and goal-oriented, and really, really connected to the outside world while the inner landscape is dying, right? People-pleasing, trying to be bigger, better, get more followers, trying to fill up from the outside in because I feel so empty on the inside out. Okay, which eventually, as we know from shamanic medicine, leads to dis-ease because your field is actually not working correctly. Okay, and everything thickens into form. So the map back to healing that we work with in the 5 pillar system and also the Liati system of the teacher training, we go from story, we go from our persona, we go from our mask that we wear, our small self, which is split, asleep, shadow driven, separate, external living only, stress, depressed, soul sadness, which is this disconnection from our heart, survival in this high beta brainwave, and exhausted but numb, but busy. Right, we go from that and we kind of start to implement these tools. Okay, and the tools that we implement are from the 5 pillars system, which if you haven't done that class, it's highly recommended. It's got a lot of juice in there. So some of the tools we implement are just sitting with ourselves and kind of working through this healing funnel. Starting to question things, starting to sit with those questions, starting to do some breath work to move subtle body energy and emotional energy so that we can feel it again and have the chance to heal it. Okay, hypnotic meditation gets us back into those deeper parts of the subconscious so we can heal belief systems. Energy medicine, that's a long story. Storytelling, because storytelling helps us get into those deeper accesses of the mind as well. Okay, and then depth psychology, which is a psychology that deals with metaphors, with story, with collective consciousness. Okay, so then what we do is with these tools, we get into our shadow work, or what I like to call light work. Okay, so we move from thinking into feeling, from naming an emotional state, naming what's happening, into a raw experience. We have the courage to feel again. Okay, and when we feel something authentic that we weren't able to feel before, we get to reclaim that shadow. We get to reclaim that part of ourself that maybe was scared, or maybe was really angry, or didn't feel like she had a voice, and we get to bring her back into the folds, bring her back into the light. Okay, so it's light work, essentially shadow work. You can think about it as maybe when you were little and something big happened, you closed that door to that part of yourself, and that room got really dusty and dark. And what we do with the shadow work is we essentially open the door and we use the tools to go in and capture and reclaim that part of ourself with safety so that we can do it in a really conscious way. Okay, when we do that stuff, then we embody it and we bring it into the real world. So we bring it into sensations, we bring it into what I like to call inner gravity, which is making choice from that place of wholeness. Okay, we start to respond instead of react. We work with boundaries, work with cleaning up relationships. We work with cleaning up the relationship mostly with ourself and our body and our emotional body. And we move into healing and expansion and remembrance. So we come back into connection with that higher self. Okay, that spiritual self that is connected to everything else. Very fun work. Yeah, so this is essentially another picture of what happens. So here's that higher self kind of muddied up a little bit underneath that big ego and persona. And this is what happens after all the work is complete. So the higher self is really reflecting through the ego. The ego is not a bad word, it's just a part of us we need to live on earth. So the higher self can reflect through there instead of the shadow. And when the higher self reflects through, what happens is we turn on that higher dimension within us, that diamond heart. You might be calling it that angelic heart, that part of us that, is so loving and tender and can heal things. We balance our brain. You can see here this guy's brain is balanced. He's both masculine and feminine, switched on, reclaimed, total and whole. Okay. He's peaceful and calm and in the present moment. There is the chakra system on the right there. The chakras are all flowing and healing and processing the consciousness that we encounter every day. So it's processing the root chakra stuff, taking care of the physical body. It's processing the second chakra, the emotions we encounter throughout the day, feeling them, owning them, releasing them when they're complete. Having healthy boundaries, having self-esteem with that solar plexus. And the human heart is turned on and it's functioning in relationship. Okay, the throat is working, the throat is expressing truth. It's filtering out belief systems that don't serve it. All right, and we're connected to our higher dimensions of wisdom with those upper chakras. So that's what happens. It's pretty cool, especially when you start to have this more automatic than such a task, which can happen. All right, these are just some of the things that do happen. I've seen it happen with lots of people. People become vibrational guides. They use the law of resonance to lift people around them. By doing nothing, just by being their vibration, they help other people as a guide. Okay, they get into sacred service, healing work. They get into soul alignment with what they're doing here. So they stop wondering what's my soul purpose and they just start living it. Okay, they've healed their traumas. And if trauma isn't always healed, then they take care of the part that's still wounded. It's an active relationship always. It's never going to be completely whole and healed because our scars are where our wisdom comes from. And if the scar goes away all the way, then we lose our wisdom. Okay, so we have esteemed purpose. All sorts of goodies can come. We have emotional fluidity, which is what I mean by you can surf the wave of your life instead of becoming the wave and drowning in it. Okay, you get to have extreme presence with those you love and the moment, which is intimacy with life, which is what we're really going for. The courage to say yes to things and connection. So there's a lot of good stuff that can come from doing this work. So if you want to do this work and you're interested, there's lots of things you can do. You can start with the 5 Pillars program. So the 5 Pillars is called 5 Pillars Reclaiming the Sacred Feminine. And it's called that because we consider the feminine the inner self, the inner landscape. And it's a self-love training where you get to work through many different tools, many different stories of Greek mythology, many different systems of healing and ascension to come home to yourself. Okay? This is a prerequisite for the teacher training. Okay, you can't help others unless you've done the work yourself, and there's a tremendous amount of knowledge in this program. Tons of knowledge. And we will use this knowledge from this program to implement it to help other people to work with coach or client dynamics. There's also a little coaching on the way. If you do the full program, you get 6 full sessions with me. So you get to have some personal coaching time through your stuff, which is really nice. Okay, then we have the Liati Teacher Training, where we take the 5 pillars, tools, and systems, and we implement it into client coach dynamics. So becoming a life coach, essentially, with specific strategies. So we really work with that healing funnel of moving from story and persona and separation into wholeness again, with different types of breath work. There's 5 distinct breath works we really go through: coherence, psychotropic, trauma release, different kriyas, and also relaxation breathing. We mix and mold those with hypnotic meditation to help the brainwave dynamics kind of come back into the fold. So we wake up parts of the brain and we start to really work with the mind through breath work, through meditation, through guidance. Okay, through Eros Logos dynamics, through how we speak, through how we get received energy. Okay, chakra healing happens when we do this. And we work this healing funnel and we keep going through it with clients, and we give them nice homework from what we know from our own 5 pillars training. Okay, and we end up in sacred service. It's a very rich system. I've been using it for a long, long time, and it really works. So that's all I got. I hope you enjoyed this little video. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me at thespiritroot.com, or just go ahead and sign up if you wish. Okay, that's all I got. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.